Welcome to the little podcast of good news. We are your hosts, Lauren
and Grace, and we are here to bring you everyday ideas for learning about and living out the way of Jesus in your family.
So, Grace.
Yes.
Summertime. How's it going?
You know, it's going.
Yeah.
It's going. It's hot.
It's hot.
It's hot.
Yeah. You know how Juneteenth is coming up?
Yes.
And we want our kids to understand that celebration in light of the gospel message.
Yes.
How can we teach our kids about Juneteenth through that lens?
Well, that's a really good question. And I'm really not a great person to answer that question because, like most white people in the South, I didn't know that Juneteenth existed until 2020, which is so sad, you know? But I have good news. We have a special guest today who can help us answer that question. Welcome to Reverend Lindsey Ardrey.
Welcome, Lindsey.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
We're so glad to have you. So if you are in this diocese, chances are Lindsey is not a brand new face and voice to you. She served in this diocese in youth ministry for many years. And we are just delighted to have her on the podcast today. So Lindsey, if you want to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself, that would be wonderful.
Oh my goodness. Okay, how long do I have? Because I can go on. You said New Orleans and my face lit up and I was like, what will I say about New Orleans? What won't I say? So I was in New Orleans for a good amount of time, working at St. George's in New Orleans, St. George's Church as children's and youth minister, and then also as co-chair for what was then called the Racial Reconciliation Commission, and all of that was just beautiful formation work. And then I had this harebrained idea, or rather God did, and I said yes. And so I went off to seminary, spent some time in Austin for 3 years through the pandemic.
Wow.
Woo.
Yeah.
Yep.
And yeah. And then I returned to New Orleans and I taught for a year out at St. Martin's Episcopal School. And I was the lower and middle school chaplain and taught middle school religion class. And so I did that. And can I add in there that I spent all kinds of time on the sidewalk next to Hanson's snowball.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
with Lauren.
It's true.
One of our hosts.
Nice.
It's true. We have found a way to have 3-hour snowballs if you've got enough to talk about. Yep.
There you go. Ministry.
That's
true. That's real ministry.
It's ministry. Yes. All you have to do, particularly, is bring an umbrella, unless you can get under an overhanging, and a chair.
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
It's great.
Which every good New Orleanian it has is a parade chair in their trunk at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And so I left. I left New Orleans and now I'm in North Carolina, and I serve as canon missioner for Reparations and Restitution Ministries in the Diocese of North Carolina. I am living life in Durham, and North Carolina is where my family roots are. And so I am about 30 minutes away where I would spend my summer times with my maternal grandparents. And it feels good. It feels great. Mm-hmm. I love the ministry, and I love the folks that I get to work with, my colleagues. It's beautiful.
And it's not as hot. It's not as hot.
Right. That's right. Everyone here was like, it's hot. And I'm like,
right.
Sure.
Such a relative thing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Yes. Well, Lindsey, we are so thrilled to have you here today to help us think through something that we talk about on the podcast quite a bit, is helping our kids. If we're doing home faith formation, if we're teaching our kids to that Christianity is not something that happens on Sunday morning in a church and then it's over and you leave. If we're really teaching our kids that Christianity is this way of life and this lens that you use to look at current events, at historical events, if we're trying to think through how do we raise kids who look around and see the face of Jesus in every single person they encounter, then we've really got to think about like, what do the different pieces look like? Like, what does that look like in your everyday life? And then what does it look like on holidays, be they religious holidays like Christmas and Easter? But then what does it look like, especially when we're dealing with history, American history, really challenging pieces of history? It's a lot to think about. It's a lot to unpack. And so, thank you so much for being here and helping us to work through and to share with the parents who are listening and grandparents and caregivers who are listening, some thoughts on how to approach this in a way that's thoughtful and respectful.
Ooh, yeah, it's really, yeah. So the work that I do is difficult for grown-ups. Um, I would say a lot of things are actually a little more difficult for grown-ups than they are for children,
True.
for young
Right.
people. Um, yeah, but I guess can I do a little bit of story sharing?
Absolutely.
Please, please, yeah.
Um,
And we might want to start by explaining what Juneteenth is,
Oh, true. Yeah.
because some of the
Some
listeners
listeners may
might
let's do
still not
not
that.
know.
even
That's true.
know.
That's true.
Yes. Okay. Um, yeah. So Juneteenth. Well, I brought a couple of books, and I feel like
Okay.
I should read from that kind of word for word. But Juneteenth is the celebration of freedom of the roundabout time period where African Americans were enslaved in here in this country and were granted emancipation. They were no longer enslaved. They were no longer in bondage, and so Juneteenth is sort of um, is the word we use because the specific day there was a one specific day, right? Um, but because there were no cell phones or regular landlines, right? So word of mouth spread very slowly. And so some folks heard the news a lot sooner. And by the time it reached Galveston, Texas, that's kind of like that last marker is when the Black folks there found out that they were free, and so it's this kind of large swath of time where folks were finding out that they were finally free, and so we kind of mix that together and say Juneteenth, and it was actually originally um, called the Day of Jubilee or Jubilation Day,
I like that.
which I believe I find that so beautiful. As I
Yeah.
was thinking, as I kept thinking about talking with you all, I subconsciously kept saying Jubilee, Jubilee, Jubilee. Yeah, which made me get out my Bible and dig into Leviticus a little bit.
Right. That's what it
Yeah, so
reminds
that's
me of, right?
Juneteenth.
Right.
Yes. Year of
Yeah.
Jubilee. Yeah, that's beautiful. I honestly, I did not realize that that's why it's Juneteenth. Like I never quite understood. Okay, I get what it's celebrating, but why isn't it just June 19th or whatever date? Like, but that it's Juneteenth, that it's that whole
Span of time.
span of time. That's really beautiful.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, so a little bit of story time. When I
Yes.
go around to churches talking with folks, because my title for this position proceed just goes ahead of me, and there are a lot of associations, positive, negative, just a lot of baggage that comes with saying the word reparations, and then you add restitution into it and people are like,
Right.
what is that? And so I tell people we're time travelers. We're all gonna just jump into doing time traveling and see um, what that means for what that means for us today. And so when I go around talking with folks, I like to say how when I was younger, I would spend my summers a good number of weeks with my maternal grandparents out here. Um, I would go to Raleigh. They belonged to, so my granddaddy was a coach at St. Augustine's University, and my grandmother was a school teacher. And so, summer times I would just come out here, and me and my grandmother would do all kinds of things. But mostly I would eat. Like that was the thing
Right.
that because I mean, also, grandmothers, right?
Right, for sure.
They want to make sure they feed you. My grandmother knew that like the first meal that I needed to have was collard greens, rice, some kind of protein, cabbage. She would have my Kool-Aid drink ready
Mm-hmm.
in the fridge. And so the are y'all familiar with how greens cook?
Mm-hmm. Grace, are
Like
you?
I mean, what do you mean? Like, why don't you tell us more?
Yeah. Okay. So the greens weren't ready. They were in process. So
Okay.
cooking collard greens, it's a whole thing because collard greens they're big and they're leafy, and they are what's the word, substantial. So you've got to she would put water in the sink, rinse them off, dry them. There was a whole thing. And then you put them on the pot with ham hock and all the seasoning, and they boil. And it is a pungent
Ah, okay.
it's a
Okay.
pungent, bitter smell, and it
Oh.
just like it just fills up the whole house. Which is sort of this beautifully suffocating kind of smell. But it did smell like love to me. But my my grandparents' house, it was like all of the living portions were on the top floor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so all the bedrooms, the kitchen, there's a bathroom, a living room. It was all up there. And I was there in the summertime. So like it got super, super just hot. Um, and if you can imagine just hot, and I feel like hot has a particular smell as well, and
Yeah,
a
sure.
feeling.
Yes.
Mixed in with the collard greens,
Right.
even though it was beautiful and lovely, and my mouth was watering, it got to be a lot. And so, what I would do was I would go downstairs, and downstairs it was always dark. It was easily 10 degrees cooler down there.
Sure.
Um, and it's also where my grandmother kept her family albums, the
Ah.
pictures. And so I would go down there into the study, and I would pull out, old yearbooks and the photo albums. My grandmother was very diligent in taking pictures, and
Mm-hmm.
then and putting them in things and writing little notes. And she would write mama, or aunt so and so, and the year. And so like I would just pour myself into these photo albums. And I would feel like uh I was seeing parts of me,
Mm-hmm.
right,
Right.
in
Sure.
these albums. And I would have questions. I was like, who's this person? and,
Right.
and so I would take the album upstairs, and I would ask my grandmother, and I'd be like, okay, okay. And then I would go back down, and, it was kind of this up, down thing. And, she would tell me stories about this was taken here. And we were in Lumberton, and that was mama and daddy's house, and it was across the street from the church. And, she would tell me all those stories. And, uh, and then August, we would have our family reunions and folks would come together and I would hear some of those stories and then hear their stories. And, as I got older, I heard the same stories and then I would hear I would realize that like some of the same stories I heard had levels to them and you would hear something a little bit different, maybe a family secret,
Right.
the
Right.
Those
stories that
secrets. Yes.
yeah, the elders didn't want you to repeat, and people were, sort of whispering it in the corners, away from the elders, and I realized like I wanted to hear those stories, and wondering why they were hushed
Mm,
stories, um, and so I tell that story because I realized that when I stepped into this role and I was going to have to talk about reparations. Like that's a whole thing that people just don't. They don't. We don't want. We don't want to talk about it. Right.
right.
It's hard. And I realized that there was this parallel, right, between not just my love for wanting to know who I came from and where I was from and the land and all of that. Um, but that the stories that we tell, right, in the church is not unlike those in our family
Right.
systems. And it does take a lot of bit of courage to go back in there and go into the corners and say, what are y'all talking about?
Right.
Maybe we can shine a little bit more light on that. Maybe we can begin to heal generational curses. Maybe we can look at the people who came before us, not not as just perfect people who always got it right,
Mm-hmm.
um, but as layered, complicated folks who contributed greatly to our lives, our families' lives, and to society, and also um, did some not so
Right.
great
Right.
things.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, how do we be able to do that, to hold that tension? And so, yeah, I think for families who want to talk about this, right, I think that's kind of a good entryway into that too, right? Like everyone has a family, everyone knows family, and we know that um, there are stories
Right.
Right.
that we want to tell out loud and other ones that that's for inside, the house.
Right.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. It's
yeah, so
interesting. So I love what you were saying about how, like, as you get older, you're learning more and more, revisiting the same stories, because one of the things with the little box of good news, right, is that we're going to have a 3-year cycle, just like the lectionary, just like everything else,
mm,
right? Like, you can present something one time, when you're 6, and then you do the exact same thing when you're 9, and it's going to be deeper. And then if you do the exact same thing when you're 12, it's going to be even more rich. And so I kind of like that, like, even with Juneteenth. So, say there's a family listening who's never celebrated Juneteenth before, hasn't ever talked about it. Maybe you just start off small, saying, "Oh, we're celebrating, this is like the end of the Civil War. Like, we're celebrating everybody's freedom, and I mean, not necessarily the end of the Civil War, but the end, the emancipation, like the freedom,
yep.
everybody's freedom. And so this is what we're celebrating." And boom, you just kind of like keep it there for that first year before and then as the kids grow, you can go deeper and deeper with the meaning behind that.
That's right. That's right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it is such a
Yeah.
good. Go ahead, Lindsay.
Oh, I was just gonna say I'm an avid um proponent of rereading books and
Mm,
rewatching shows, right? Because you're not the same person also that
Right.
you are when you approach it again. Yeah, what will you learn?
right.
Yeah.
Right. And it's such a good analogy of kind of the family stories, right? And the ones that we want to tell and the ones we really don't want to tell. But sometimes the ones we don't want to tell shaped our family's
That's
future. And
right.
that's
Right.
the same thing with the American story. The stories we don't want to tell have shaped things that we see right now happening today. And so it's hard, but it's necessary. That is one question that I had for you as a white parent who wants my kids to know about Juneteenth and to understand the meaning behind it and why it is so special to so many people. How appropriate is it for white people to say like celebrate Juneteenth? Like, at what point are you appropriating something
Right.
that isn't yours? What
Yeah.
do what cautions would you offer white
Mhm.
parents who are listening? What advice would you offer about how to approach it? The last thing I want to do is shape it for my kids where it's like, well, that's someone else's holiday, and we're not even going to talk about it. I mean, the
Right.
othering is what we've got to stop doing. But at the same time, there is such a thing as appropriation, which I don't want to steer too far that way.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. It's a difficult dance, right?
Right.
Yeah, because yeah, I had a mix of feelings when they were like, okay, Juneteenth, national holiday, and then it became like so commodified. On one hand, I was like, yay, I can finally get like Juneteenth things, but now so can everyone
Yeah.
else. Yeah, so I would say like that first step is the learning piece, is the knowledge piece. Um, I don't think you can ever appropriate knowledge.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Hearing the stories, telling the story. So I think that's always a very safe space. And then I think in terms of like the actual celebrating of it, I wouldn't probably wouldn't throw your own Juneteenth party. Um, maybe talk to some folks and, listen for how your African American friends are celebrating, and learn a little bit about it. And if you get an invitation, I would say, yeah, take it. I think that's a space where you kind of um, do your own homework on it, learn about it, teach it to your kids, and maybe do some of your own like internal projects, and then yeah, talk with friends about it, and if you get invited, go.
Hmm.
um and probably not invite yourself to
Right.
Yeah.
said things.
Very good
Yeah.
advice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I had
Yeah.
a when we first, you know, came to the realization of, oh, okay, this is Juneteenth and this is what we're celebrating. My kids and I were like, okay, how do we celebrate this? And so I asked one of our black friends at church, I'm like, what should we do? And she said, well, what would you do for a different Independence Day? She's like, if you're ones who
Yeah.
are just gonna, if you have a barbecue and have fireworks, then have a barbecue and have fireworks. Like, if this is like a real Independence Day, and that really resonated like with my kids, although we
Mm.
have not been able to find fireworks ever in June. They're not quite out yet. But the idea of like, well, it's a real freedom day, right? Because 4th of
Mm.
July is just for some people, but this is like everybody's freedom and independence. And so I always thought that was an interesting way, right? Like, not trying to do what someone else's culture does, but to like, okay,
Yeah.
how can we celebrate it ourselves? Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I think with big kids, when you're able to have more conversations about things like white privilege and
Right.
what that means and
Yeah.
what that looks like in America, I wonder if you could, one of the sort of themes that comes up on this show a lot is like, is there a way that we can tie serving to what we're teaching our kids. So I wonder if something as simple as, where do we see like institutionalized racism that still exists, and where might we on Juneteenth, is it that we sit down and we write letters to our Congress people
Right.
pointing out like, and maybe that's like our way of recognizing, not so much celebrating the holiday, like
Recognizing we're not fully there yet either.
well, and that's the
right?
thing.
That's
and
a big piece.
as white people
Right.
being able to sit and say, okay, well, where do I still have advantages that I see my brothers and sisters in Christ whose skin is a different color who don't? And like those family stories, it's thanks to this American family story that's really a dark part of our history and something that, we still see the effects of today. So maybe, maybe for white families, it's that we sit down and we have a conversation about where do we have some element of, control. It's very hard to control the world around you, but you absolutely can sit down and write a letter to people who are in charge. You can't, so maybe it's like your yearly reminder that there is so much to celebrate in America, but there's so much work to do.
Sure.
And maybe, maybe for your white family, this is a day that we sit down and we do what we can towards some of that work.
I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I feel like that kind of plays with too, right? Someone's day of celebration may not be right a day of celebration for everyone, right? 'Cause that has different meanings, and so yeah, so you're honoring that
Right.
celebration, and perhaps your part is to sit and examine. Yeah.
Even
I love
personal
that.
family stories. I mean, especially in the South here, like,
Right.
Like you said, like people need to dig up and find out, their own family stories and what needs to be done, and, like the reparations and the restitutions and like how can we work for this and how can we make things right.
Yeah, it's hard work, but if we just keep kicking the can down the street to the next generation, the next generation, the next
That's right.
generation, nothing's getting
That's
solved
right.
when you do that.
Right.
Lindsay, just, why not throw another just absolutely challenging question at you,
Yes.
since that's the theme of the morning. One thing that I think is also difficult when we're trying to approach it through this Christian lens is the idea of the role that Christianity has played in oppressing people worldwide. But I mean, it was used as a way to justify the very enslavement that was happening here in the United States. And so I know that there are people who, when they grapple with this, it's like, I'm out. I can't do the Christian piece anymore. It's tied to too many difficult parts of history. So if you have any thoughts, any sort of theology that you rely on that might help us, especially with bigger kids, have that conversation about, the Christians were not necessarily all the ones saying, oh, we know the right thing to do for people. That's not the reality. We would love your wisdom related to that too.
Yeah. So yeah, I was one of those people that was like, can I stay here? Should I stay here? And here I am,
Right.
in a collar. Um, so clearly my answer is yes, but it is, it is still a live question for me. And I think for me, it's always Jesus. Um, that's what gets me right. It reminds me that kind of Christianity as we have lived it out as humans, royally kind of, messing things up, mucking up everything. That we wrestle with that, and we should wrestle with that, and we should keep shining light and keep telling the truth, and keep telling those stories, and understand that there are the holy scriptures, that there is the witness of Jesus, before
Mm-hmm.
Christianity and before the enslavement um, of Africans. And if we also look at Jesus, Jesus was and his people were also under rulers. They were under the empire of Rome. And so if we see Jesus like that, if we see Jesus as part of an oppressed people, a
Mm-hmm.
part of a people who are under the thumb of Rome, then we can start to see the parallels. We can start to see, when Jesus says he's here to free the captives, he's here to heal people, right? What he's actually saying is he's coming here to open all the doors to the prison.
Mm-hmm.
He's here to liberate folks from all kinds of maladies, all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of diseases. He's here to cure people. He's here to exorcise. I think that gets underplayed in our society today, definitely in the Episcopal Church,
Mm-hmm.
right? But Jesus is going around exorcising demons,
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and um, I would say racism and our legacy with enslavement. I mean, it's dark, it's ugly. There you have to. I think humans literally had to separate them, right, their activities from their souls to be
Mm-hmm.
able to do some of the things that they let happen, whether they were doing that themselves or they were just right complicit within a society. And so, right, Jesus was exorcising demons,
Mm-hmm.
and gave the power to his disciples to go and do the same thing. And so if we say that we are Jesus's disciples, if we say that we are followers of Jesus, right, then Jesus has empowered us, has equipped us to do the exact same thing, to call out these things, and to really pay attention um, to people, to people's bodies, and their souls.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I love that you used that scripture verse because you don't know this, but in the scripture box,
That's right. The little box of good
the
news
little
always
box
comes
of good
back.
news, it comes back. I mean, that's what put us here.
Mm-hmm.
But it's coming out. It'll be mailed out July 1st. We'll make sure you get one too.
Mm-hmm.
But for one of the activities, for the family activity, it is exactly that scripture. And it's sending the families on a mission to say, okay, you're supposed to free people from oppression. Who do you see is oppressed? What is oppression? And so that's the activity. So, yeah, so if you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, yeah, I want to do that. If you can't think of what to do, you can just wait a couple of weeks
Yeah,
to
it's in the
get your
scripture
scripture box.
That's right.
and then tie that in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, gosh, you know how Juneteenth is coming up and we want our kids to understand how to celebrate it in the light of the gospel message.
Yeah.
What's the good news?
Good news. If you listen to this episode, the Reverend Lindsey Ardrey will walk you through such wonderful, thoughtful, gracious ways to do this and do it well.
Amen. That is good news.
That is good news.
That is good news. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes,
and for
Lindsey,
joining
thank
us,
you.
Lindsey. Y'all,
Thank you.
please get your own little box of good news on the website, littleboxofgoodnews.com. And Lindsey, we're giving you a free subscription to it because that's what we do for our guests. So you will you'll get the prayer box that's already come out,
Yeah.
and then we'll get you this one too.
Yeah. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are at Little Box of Good News on all the channels.
Yes, and on YouTube, y'all, we got a new camera.
We did.
So hopefully this looks like really nice in 4K. Hopefully it works.
Right.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can see us there. And Lindsey, Was there anything else that you wanted to share that
Yeah.
you didn't get to say? I'm sorry, I kind of like jumped through that
That's okay.
spot.
Oh, well, I do have a couple of books.
Ooh.
I
Oh,
was
yes.
Big surprise. If you know Lindsay, you
yes.
were waiting for the book recommendations. So yeah,
Yes,
here they
and we
come.
always love
Yeah.
to like, yes, put those in our show notes
Yeah,
too.
we love to link the books.
Ooh, yes. Okay. So I work with a Johnson Service Corps fellow, and she went and found some books, and then I have a couple of books from my own stash. But she found this
Oh,
book.
wow.
Okay.
You see that?
Yeah.
It's called Juneteenth Is, and this is just kind of it's really beautiful.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
Um, and it's a story about a family celebrating Juneteenth. The artwork is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's by Natasha Triplett.
Okay.
And so that's one book. And then she found this book, the Juneteenth Cookbook.
Ooh.
I would say this one is really good as well. It's from the perspective of a little young girl, but it has, like, if you're wanting to know the background of Juneteenth as well. Like, she's got history of Juneteenth down here, a whole introduction, and then for the questions that you asked, how to use this book to celebrate Juneteenth.
Ah.
And so I think, and it's got, recipes in here.
Fun.
And so that could be a good way to celebrate, right, at your house. Here are some of the foods, right? Because the foodways also are just so tied into African American culture and the lives of those who were enslaved, and right, how we pass that down.
Does it have greens in there? Is it going to teach us how to cook the collard greens like your grandmother, like you
It
told us
does. I
about?
think.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure greens are in here. Um, if not, they're in the next book
Oh,
that
okay.
yeah. Lauren, there are watermelon snow cups in
Oh, my
here.
goodness.
Oh.
Uh, yeah. Yeah, there's Hoppin' John's, Mac and Please, she calls it. Um,
How delightful.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's good. And then this last one, I forgot, well, almost last one. I forgot that I was buying a baby shower present for a friend at a children's store, and then I saw this and I was like, this is for me. So I bought it. But this is from the author. She put herself back as a young girl when she was living in California, and then she would go and visit her grandparents in Louisiana.
Wow.
So this one's got a little, hometown flavor for y'all. Um, but and it's got a little bit, it does a little bit of history, like it has these pockets on the side.
Oh,
Um,
cute. Okay.
right here,
Yeah.
that kind of give, like, these are what black eyed peas are. And then, like, when they name the transatlantic slave trade, it has like just a little
Oh,
insert about
yeah.
that.
And what's the
And I
name of that
think
book?
this one is called Black Eyed Peas and Hoghead Cheese.
Hoghead cheese.
That's
There you
great.
Yeah. And then, oh, I will say this one, because it's Black Eyed Peas. This one is actually a New Year's Day.
go. Okay, that makes sense.
Right.
Sure. That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking when you said black eyed peas, right? That's a very
yeah, yeah. So it's not
traditional.
Juneteenth specific, but it does talk about it, does tie it into freedom towards the
Sure.
end. And then the last one is like my all-time favorite. It's my go-to. I started reading this to adults, actually. But this is The People Could Fly, and it's a folklore tale about enslavement. And there are these folk tales that the recently freed folks were actually telling stories of people who would disappear, vanish, fly off from plantations. And so I just always think this is a beautiful story of spirituality, of hope, of magic, and yeah, it's just beautiful. So The People Could Fly by Virginia Hamilton.
Wow.
It's great. And there's this is an illustrated edition, but it's part of a bigger book that has all kinds of folk tales in it. So if you're interested in, learning a little bit more about Black folklore in general, that's a good book.
Yeah, that's
Wow.
awesome. Well, I'll make sure that all these go in our show notes.
Yeah,
since
definitely.
we figured out how to do that.
Right,
Yes.
right.
We can do that.
Reverend Lindsey has no shortage of book recommendations.
Yes,
Don't
that's
you worry.
awesome. That's awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We really enjoyed our time with you, Reverend Lindsey.
For sure. And
Thank
everyone
you.
else. Yeah. We'll see you all next week. Bye.
The Little Podcast of Good News is a ministry of the Little Box of Good News. The hosts are Lauren Dunn and Grace Rose. This podcast has been edited by Cyril Rose and is produced by the Episcopal Diocese of Louisiana. For more from the Episcopal Diocese of Louisiana, please visit us at edola.org.